Hey guys, it's Dr. Margarella here, and I'm going to talk to you about the CEPT1 lesson plan template. I'm going to go through it section by section so that you know exactly what I'm looking for and you have some clarity about the different elements since we're all learning this together. All right, so let's begin with the introduction section. This is pretty self-explanatory. Here you're going to put your name, the name of your mentor teacher, the grade level that you'll be teaching, the date you'll be teaching your lesson, and the class period and subject. So if it's US history, that's what you would put there. Now in the background section, I ask you some open-ended questions. So I want for you to answer these questions below where I've typed out the question. So if a student begins talking during the lesson, what will you do? Consider a call and response strategy. So this is where you would say, I'll be utilizing a call and response strategy in which when I say such and such, the students will reply with such and such. This shows me that you're thinking about some potential distractions or disruptions to the lesson in advance. Same thing with if participation is low, what will you do to increase engagement? So if you're just hearing crickets in the classroom, it shouldn't be a cue for you to just proceed with the lesson. You should have an idea in mind of what you would do to encourage students to participate more actively. This is an important one that I think a lot of STEP students overlook. So how will you call on your students? A lot of times STEP students only rely on volunteers, and I'm really not crazy about that. I would like for you to use volunteers sometimes, but I would also like to see students being called on by name or random. You could use wheel of names. You can use index cards to call on students, popsicle sticks. But I want to make sure that you're not only utilizing volunteers to call on your students. Will you be using any form of technology? Remember, technology is great, but it's not the end all be all. So if you're using technology, please make sure that you're using it thoughtfully and with a clear purpose and that it enhances the lesson rather than causes a distraction. Here we talk about videos. Videos should be short and they should serve a purpose. If you don't need to show the whole video, don't show the whole video. Remember to pause videos frequently and use guided notes to really show the students what you want them to be paying attention to. If students are giving presentations of any kind at the end, make sure that the students that are supposed to be listening to the presentations have something to do, some type of note-taking guide, or they're giving feedback to the peer that's presenting. Think about what students are supposed to be doing, and the answer should not be listening because your students, they won't. They just won't. So you need to have something for them to do at their seats while they're paying attention. All right, so now let's move on to the alignment section. Okay, so here we're talking about standards. So I've got different standards linked here. You'll need at least one content standard. So that would be a history standard, or an English language arts standard, or a language standard. And then you'll also need a literacy standard. If you are an English person, then your literacy standards are embedded more naturally. But if you're a social studies person, you'll need an explicit literacy standard, and those are linked here. So you'll need at least one content standard and one literacy standard. Here's where we're going to write our objective, which is written for the adults in the room. So that always begins with students will be able to, and then uses one of your sentence starters from Bloom's. So that is linked right here. So you'll want to use your Bloom's verbs and your Bloom's sentence starters. Here in the activity section, I want you to think about the strategy from your text that you'll be using. So I have those class text links here for you. So a strategy from one of these two books to encourage student-centered and active learning. Okay. Then I want you to think about your assessment. So how are you going to tell me whether or not your students actually understood the material that you taught them today? And you shouldn't rely on things like participation. You need to have some actual data. So some sort of exit ticket, Google form, anything that you can assess with a rubric needs to be utilized, and it needs to be aligned very clearly to the activity and to your learning objective. So for example, if your learning objective is that students will be able to bake a cake, well, then your assessment should be that students bake a cake, right? And it would be, made properly. So use that example in your mind and think like, does my assessment actually indicate whether the students completed the objective that I stated earlier on? Um, Okay, let's see. The procedure section, this is where you're going to map out a script of everything you're going to be doing minute by minute. So I want you to think about what you're doing as far as transitions and how long each section of the lesson should take. This is where you're going to talk about your bell ringer. So you might have a bell ringer where you pose a question to excite your students about the lesson at hand. So you're going to indicate how many minutes that should take, and you're going to identify what that bell ringer is going to look like. After your bell ringer, you can move into your hook, which is where you're going to get your students really excited. So think about some way that you're going to draw in their attention to the topic of the day. From there, you're going to bridge into your learning target. And remember, your learning target is your I can statement. Okay, so your I can statement, you need to explicitly either read it to your students, have your one student volunteer to read it aloud, or you can have your students choral read it. So you could have all of them read it together. It's up to you, but it needs to be read out loud right here. Then I want you to make some sort of connection to previous knowledge. So, what did the students do the day before? What have they previously learned? And what way does what you're doing today connect to something that was learned previously? Could be the day before, the week before, the year before, but you need to make some sort of connection. You want to make sure that the students understand that the content builds upon itself. This isn't something that just lives in isolation. So you're making key connections to what they've learned previously, and then you're also incorporating elements to describe why this is important. So that's that why slide that we've talked about. Then you're going to move into your strategy. Remember, these come from your books. So again, those are linked here. You can do one or two strategies depending on how many minutes you have. And then after your strategy, you'll have some kind of closure where you'll summarize things. You'll remind the students of the learning target again. So, hey guys, remember at the beginning of the lesson when we said we were going to be able to do such and such? I can, da da da. Well, you did. You did that today. And this is how we accomplished it. And you're going to summarize the important elements of the day and assess whether or not the students actually learned the material that you said they were going to learn. So higher order thinking questions should be sprinkled all throughout your lesson, beginning, middle, and end. And you can use your sentence starters to get those written. So make sure that you're using that handout with the sentence starters. It's linked above. I'll after I finish this video, I'll link it here as well. So to make sure that you're being thoughtful and you're scripting out those questions in advance. If you think that you're going to come in and just ask questions on the fly off the top of your head, you're not going to be successful. We're not in a position to ask questions off the top of our head at this point. So you want to frame those questions in advance using your sentence starters. Put them on your Google Slides or on a handout so that you don't forget and that you read them accurately. You want to read them like it's a movie script so that you make sure you get every word correct. And you can use these higher order thinking questions on your assessments as well. So I want to see at least 5 very high level questions, but really it should be more than that. Just make sure you aren't asking a whole lot of remember questions. Some of those are important. Some remember questions have a place, but it shouldn't be the only thing that I hear from you all. All right, and I think that's about it. So I think you are more than ready now to get started on your lesson plan. So let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.